Right, welcome to 1066. What we're going to do in the next few minutes is reenact the core events of 1066. The idea is that you gain an idea of the sequence events and the key people, but there's also a deeper idea that lies in this, and that's built around the kind of problem that people often have when studying what happened in 1066. The usual problem is that people expect there to be only one certain outcome, that William won, because that's what happened. What you have to try to understand is that that wasn't certain, that there could have been other outcomes, and hopefully this activity has been constructed to get that idea across. You are standing in a map of Britain and northern France. And we've got the key people. We have here the King of England, the beginning of 1066, Edward the Confessor, supported by his main noblemen, Harold Godwinson, and Harold's brothers, Gurth and Leofwin. We've also got here two northern English noblemen, Morcar and Edwin. Now, just to give us a complete picture, we've also got William of Normandy and his supporters. Sorry, I've just got my feet wet there. This is the English Channel. And if I walk up here, I can cross the North Sea. Harold Hardrada, King of Norway, the greatest soldier in Europe. Now, round the edge, there's some people playing other roles. We've got two saga writers. We've got a couple of Anglo-Saxon chroniclers and a Norman embroiderer and chronicler. The roles of these groups is to keep a record of what you see happening in front of you, so that when we finish this activity and want to look at the sources, you've predicted what might be in those sources. So that's the layout of the room organised and the key people identified. But you may be wondering at this stage, what preparation has taken place beforehand? What have students read up? And the answer is, they haven't. Because if you ask them to read up in advance, then when they're meant to be thinking and answering the questions, they'll be trying to remember what they've read before. And the business of remembering actually gets in the way of thinking. So this kind of activity is better done from scratch. The reading comes later.
This year I decided that I would go straight into the activity. There were three main reasons. Firstly, I wanted an element of surprise. Secondly, I really wanted to engage the pupils into the activity. And thirdly, I wanted to really see what they could get out of it, some kind of speculation of what the events were going to turn into.
So we start with Edward. The beginning of January 1066. Sadly, Edward is nearing death and has no heir, no children. Three men at the beginning of 1066 wish to be King of England. Let's start with Harold. Why do you want to be King of England?
I've already proved myself as a brilliant leader of men by leading English armies against the Welsh. And what's more, the old king wished me to be king upon his death.
Two good reasons: military strength and a promise. Who else wants to be King of England? King of Norway, Harold? Why do you want to be King of England?
Well, I've also proved that I'm a good soldier through past victories. England's one of the wealthiest countries in Europe.
So
if I was king, I'd be even wealthier than I am now.
So there's just a touch of greed in this. Just a touch of greed, a touch of power, and your name will resound through history if you can do this. Yes. Okay, William, why do you want to be King of England?
Because it's a rich country and I was promised to be king.
So it's not just greed on your part. You got a promise from?
King Edward.
From King Edward. Edward seems to have been a bit generous with his promises, perhaps, but we'll forgive you. But unfortunately, your brain is coming very swiftly to a close. And very beginning of January, Edward dies. So if you'd like to stand up, take the tabard off, and then we'll recycle you as an English nobleman. So if you stand there, and the question is, who's going to be the next king? So, English nobles, Leofwin, Gurth, newly revived English nobleman, Morcar and Edwin. Who do you want to be king? Do you want it to be one of your own English nobles, one of yourselves, or would you be happy to have a foreign ruler?
A home king.
A home king? Why?
Don't want foreigners in our country.
Yeah. What's this sort of selfish? What would be the reason for that?
We want to keep our wealth.
So if one of these foreign kings comes in, what are you afraid of?
That he'll take our land and our wealth away from us.
So after all, he's got his own supporters, hasn't he? So if they come over with him, they expect to take land and wealth, in which case you could be in trouble. Yeah? So that's the difficulty with another king coming in. Your positions might well be in jeopardy. So one of your own. Who's it to be? Who's it to be? Who would you two like to see as the next king?
Our brother Harold.
Your brother Harold. This isn't the least bit of a selfish thought, is it? What do you think you might get out of it?
You might end up a bit more wealthy.
Even wealthier.
Powerful.
Yes. So, Harold? Would you support Harold?
Yes, I would.
Would you support Harold? Right. So, Harold. So, Harold Godwinson, chosen by as King of England. There we go. This is a crucial stage of the activity, with Harold facing some genuinely difficult decisions. But what happens if the student playing Harold makes some unhistorical decisions, gets them wrong? Well, the answer is don't panic. You can bring in some other students, you can drop some hints. You've got time to go over the situation and explore the possibilities, to look at why it is that the student has taken a different decision from Harold in 1066. And quite often, these are the moments when actually the most learning takes place. Mistakes in these situations can be very fruitful. So, let's turn to King Harold, who suddenly begins to realise the responsibilities and threats. Stand up. There's the possibility of 2 invasions. How are you going to defend your country? Where are you going to put your army?
Where I think they will land.
Mm-hmm. So, are you going to have the army down here on the south coast, or are you going to have the army up there in the north?
Well, if I've got enough men, I'll try and do both.
Try and do both. Okay, that sounds a good plan. So, you can bring your men here, and turn around, you move around and come here and face the south coast in case the invasion comes that way. Okay? So who are you depending on now to defend the north if they arrive first, if the Norwegians arrive first?
I'll be in trouble, I think.
You could be in trouble. Okay, so if you took your army north, you could, well, let's see. Let's take the English army north. Come on, move. Okay, so now you're fine now for defending yourself against the Norwegians. What happens if the Normans arrive?
Oh dear.
Oh dear. Yes. So what about the Northern Earls and their supporters? Are you going to have to involve them?
Yes, most definitely.
You're going to have to depend on them. So are you prepared to defend the North on behalf of the King?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, but. Yes, if.
I can keep my wealth.
That's the sort of thinking we like. Yes, if there's something for me in it. Yes. So is there something for them in it?
Yes, definitely.
Because you could be in deep trouble otherwise. Right, so let's have Harold and his army back down here, ready to defend against a potential invasion from Normandy. And then we've got Edwin and Morcar and their massed forces ready to defend against the awesome might of Harold Hardrada. What decides who arrives first? These ships we've been talking about, what size engines have they got? They haven't got any. So what power have they got? Manpower, wind power. So what's going to decide who arrives first? The weather. And this is where the weather played a very important part. If I can briefly demonstrate. Here we go. This is the problem. Can you get out of port in your sail-driven ships with the wind against you? No. While the wind's against you, you're stuck. Right? Looks better with you with the longer hair. Although not many Normans did have long hair. So, the Normans are stuck in port simply because the weather's against them. And while the hairdryer continues to blow in their faces and the wind pegs them in port, that gives the Norwegians the opportunity to arrive in the north of England. So, we'll head north and we'll see what happens. Right, let's sail across the North Sea. Now then, here they are. They've landed in Yorkshire. What are you going to do? Are you going to fight or let them take over? Fight. Are you going to wait for Harold?
No.
It's too far away.
It's going to be a long time, a week or 10 days before he's able to join you. And therefore, the first battle of 1066 takes place here in Yorkshire, just outside York, and that's the Battle of Fulford. The Norwegians against the Northern English. And it was, despite the heroic bravery of the Northern English, a victory for the Norwegians. So, battered, bruised, you have to limp away. Come a little bit further down here. And what are you going to do now, other than tend your bruises? And do you think King Harold ought to know what's happening?
Yeah.
So we need a messenger. So a messenger gallops down south and says, King Harold, the Norwegians have landed. What are you going to do?
I will rally my armies in the south.
And are you going to march north to defeat, to take on the victorious Hardrada? Why is it a difficult decision?
Because you can't bring two places at once.
You can't. And if you go north, the risk is what?
That William will arrive.
Right. But you're in a really difficult situation. So you haven't got a best choice, have you? No. You've got what's the least worst choice? Mm-hmm. So what's the least worst choice?
Well, to conserve the army's strength, to stay put.
Right. You're going to stay put. Or now that's not what Harold did. Harold headed north. Why do you think Harold headed north? Why do you any ideas why Harold went north as fast as he could?
Because they were already here.
Because they were already here. But what was a king expected to do? Defend his people. So what would the Northerners think of you as a king if you didn't head up north fast to kick this invading force out?
I would lose face.
You would. You'd lose face. Reputation would be shot to pieces. So, prestige. And after all, you've got this great military record. You can beat them. And Harold marches his army north ever so quickly. Really quickly. So quickly that he takes the Norwegians by surprise. You haven't moved. Come on, you march north quickly. Oh, we're going to have to work on the cues here. And we, taken by surprise, we get the second battle of September 1066, the Battle of Stamford Bridge, where the heroic English destroyed the Norwegians. Very few of the Norwegians survived to go home. So if you could remove your tabard and go back to Valhalla, the heaven of the Vikings. That was a march and a battle, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Right, so what are you going to do now?
Rest.
Rest. Look after your wounds. A little drink. Little drink, something to eat. Basically, you need to rest, don't you? It's been a huge exertion, both physically and mentally. The trouble is that while you were up north, the dreaded wind had changed direction, and now it's blowing this way. Okay? And it allows the Normans to sail across the channel and invade. So, stop. Do you notice anything?
Just cross the sea.
Sorry?
Just cross the sea.
Just cross the sea, yeah, so you feel a little bit seasick. But what else? What surprises you now you're here?
There is no army.
There's nobody here to defend. So, where's Harold? The messenger again rides north and arrives and says, the Normans have landed. Oh dear. You're very restrained, sort of Harold, aren't you? Oh dear. Right. So, now again you've got choices. You can march south as fast as you can to attack the invader. What would be the argument in favour of taking it a little more slowly and getting there in a few days longer? What advantages would that give you?
I'm just tired when we got there.
You wouldn't be as tired. You've just fought one battle. Some men have fought two. So your forces are...
A bit difficult to get people on the way down.
Yeah. You're not going to have as many men as you had a week ago. You need to build up your forces. They need rest. You need reinforcements. You probably need weapons to be replaced. So take your time. What's the disadvantage of taking your time? What are they doing while you're there? Good strong foothold. And again there's the issue of what is a king expected to do?
Defend off.
So the people now in the south are saying, where's Harold? Another argument, you beat the Norwegians, you took them by surprise. Perhaps you could do the same with William. Which choice are you going to take? Are you going to head back quickly, or are you going to make it slow?
I think I'll go for the slow option.
Right. Harold went for the other one. But is it a difficult choice?
Yes.
Yeah, again, there isn't an ideal answer, is there? It's quite tricky to decide which to go for. Harold heads south. And attacks William as quickly as he can. And this we get the third battle. So on Saturday, the 14th of October, 1066, the Battle of Hastings takes place. And are we surprised Harold loses?
No.
Not really.
Why not?
Because it's already weak and they're fresh for battle.
They're fresh. You fought. This is your second major battle. You've marched and ridden up the country and back south. Harold has actually made a very, very good job of defending the country, but it was just too much. So I'm afraid you died and King William. But what would have happened if the hairdryer had been blowing in their direction to start with? Who would have landed first? And perhaps you'd have beaten them. They landed. Could have been a different King Harold. We could have ended 1066 with a different monarch. It needn't have worked out the way it did. But that's what happened. Let's ask the most difficult question you can ever ask in a lesson. What have you learnt from doing this? That's not necessarily a difficult question because it's hard to answer. It's a difficult question from the teacher's point of view, because if people stay there silent, you think, oops, just wasted the last 40 minutes.
I think they learnt a huge amount. I mean, not just the facts, the chronology, the characters involved, but a much deeper understanding of what was going on.
They get a good sense of chronology, which I think is key. They also get a good sense of understanding of why things happened.
There's also the question of our chroniclers. So let's talk to the Norwegian saga writers. Now, if you were doing this with a class, you'd do this in far more detail and far more solely, but let's just give you one very guided question. In your story of what's just happened, are you going to include William of Normandy's victory at Hastings?
No.
No? So where would you stop?
I would make Harold sound really brave to start with, and due to unfortunate circumstances.
Beyond his control. So you'd describe his great victory, and then unfortunately you'd have to describe his death, and that's really where your story might well finish. But you'd put a lot of emphasis upon his victory. Our Norman source, would you include everything you've seen, or is there anything you would leave out?
I'd probably leave out the Norwegians completely and their battle, and start from where the English came down with like a depleted army.
Right. Would you say very much about it being depleted?
Probably, I'd say quite a bit how
What?
weak they were.
Why would you leave the Norwegians out?
Because they are the reason, they give a reason for why the army was weak.
Right.
Other than the fact that Harold's just not a good king.
So you don't really want Harold to appear a very good king, do you? How do you want William to appear?
I want him to appear a strong leader, and that somebody who is going to take what is rightfully theirs as the promise was broken to him. Right.
So focus on the promise, leave what happened up there out. What we can do by focusing on the chroniclers and asking students to do this, and do it in a bit more detail than we've just done, is to predict what the sources actually say. So if I then, in a very boring follow-up lesson, gave you the sources, you could compare what they wrote with what you've said and why they're the same and why they're different. This might help you understand what's in them just a little more deeply than if I gave you to them without playing this part.
A very interesting mixed response. I mean, the top sets, the bottom sets were fantastic, really engaged, really enjoyed it, great questions, great analysis. The middle set found it very challenging for them. I mean, they found the sort of behaviour management element difficult because they were not very well trained at doing this. It was the first time they'd done it. I think if you're looking at this topic in the traditional way, using textbooks and worksheets, using role play absolutely blows that out of the water. It's far more engaging, far more exciting. The pupils are learning and having fun at the same time.
So that was the activity on the events of 1066. As you've seen, it's a very structured activity. Students only move when the teacher wishes them to do so, which reduces concerns over class management. It's also an activity which doesn't require lots of reading beforehand. All the information students need is on the roll cards, which means they can genuinely think from the inside of the situations. The demands on their concentration is high, far higher than if you were just talking at them, but this of course means that they do learn more. And a final point. This is an activity you can use with students of all ages, from year 7 through to A level and on to university. Of course, with more able students or more mature students, you increase the level of detail and the level of demand. You can include Tostig, Robert of Mortain, William's crossing of the Channel. You can increase the level of demand, but the basic structure of the activity remains the same. Above all, however, don't leave out the hairdryer. You don't make activities more demanding by making them more boring.